Hello. Welcome to UX and Coffee. I'm Jen Romano. I'm excited to chat with you today about the questions you should be asking when you land that interview. This is really important because if you don't have any questions to ask when your interviewer says, "Do you have any questions for me?" It may show that you're not excited. It may show that you don't know anything about the company. You really want to have some questions prepared. And and the other thing about that is remembering that an interview is a two-way street. So I share this with clients all the time. People get excited about interviews, they get nervous about interviews, and they feel that they are the ones being interviewed, which obviously you are being interviewed for a job. But the thing that a lot of clients forget is that this is your opportunity to interview the company as well, to interview your potential manager, your potential teammates, others who have worked at the company who, they've been there a while, and you can ask them questions about what their experience has been like. You get to learn if that company or that team is a good match for you. So you want to make sure you have some questions prepared. The questions that you prepare are not necessarily universal. And what I mean by that is maybe they're not universal by company. You might have specific questions by company, and they're not necessarily universal depending on who you're talking to, right? You're not going to ask the same questions to your hiring manager, director level person that you would to someone who would be your peer or to someone who would be your partner, like a design partner or an engineer partner. So I recommend having some different questions prepared for any of these situations. So some generic questions that you can have prepared. Oh, the other thing I want to mention is you want this to be natural. So you want to ask questions that are important to you. So don't just look up, top questions to ask. Don't just listen to me, by the way. I'm about to share some questions that you can ask during an interview, but don't just listen to me. Have your own ready because again, this is a chance for you to interview them to see if they are a good fit for you. So just finding some generic questions online about like what questions you should ask, or just listening to Jen Romano about what questions she thinks you should ask, that's not really sufficient. Maybe that's a good starting point if you're really not sure what kinds of questions to ask. But really think about what's important to you. What's important to me at a company could be different, probably is different than what's important to you. So think about what's really important to you. These days, a lot of companies have hybrid roles, and you may want to know how strict they are with those hybrid policies. If they say in their job postings, or if the recruiter said to you that it's 3 days in the office or 2 days in the office, is that, do they stick to that, right? Like how strict are they with being in the office 3 days a week, 2 days a week? Maybe you don't care. Maybe you're excited to go back to the office. Maybe you actually want to know the opposite. Maybe your question is not how strict are they. Maybe your question is, the other teammates, the other people on the team, how often are they coming into the office? So you get an idea of what that culture is like. You get an idea for how strict they are with that policy, but also in general, genuinely, how often are people in the office? If you want to get to know your teammates and you want to have lunch, you want to have coffee with them, how often are they actually there? If you're expecting to go into the office and build these relationships, but nobody else on the team comes into the office, that might be something you want to know. So any questions around hybrid, around remote are important to ask if those things are important to you. Again, that might not be important to you. I love working remotely. These are things that are important to me. But for others who, they can take it or leave it, or they really want to be in the office, that these things might not be as important to them. But think about that. Think about your lifestyle. Think about the kind of lifestyle you want to have. Is it a 9 to 5? Are people online? Are you expected to be online? Is Slack going off all day? Like, what is that culture like? And these kinds of questions might be suited for the hiring manager, but you actually might want to save those for teammates and people that you may work with, people who've been on the team for a while, because they might be a little more honest about these types of things. A hiring manager might be more strict because maybe they have to be honest. or maybe it's their vision of what they would like it to be, but maybe your teammates will be more accurate and more open about those kinds of things. So think about who that makes sense to actually ask those questions to. In general, you obviously want to ask questions about the role. So you probably will have information, you should have information going in about what that role looks like and what you'll be doing. But you can ask other questions specifically about that role, like, what does this look like in the future? What will I be doing when I arrive? That's actually a really big one, because oftentimes these roles are pretty generic, right? We're looking for a UX researcher to work on X, Y, and Z team. And a lot of these job postings will say the same things about what they're looking for, but specifically asking what you will be working on might be really valuable. If it ends up being some project that is really not exciting for you, maybe that's not a good fit for you. Or maybe it's something that's not really exciting in the moment, but there's a need. But, in a month or in a year from now, here's where I see this role going, right? So that's the kind of thing that you can ask the hiring manager. What are the things I'll be doing right when I arrive? And then what does this look like in the future? It's also a different kind of question, but the same kind of question. It's also something that you can ask to potential teammates, where you ask them about their role. So how long have they been there, and what has their trajectory looked like? When they started, what did it look like? And to where it is now, what does it look like? And how has that changed? How do people on the team work? Do they share projects, or is each researcher responsible for something and they're kind of working in silos? That's something that's important to me. I like to work with other people. I also like to work on my own. So personally, I like a mix of these kinds of things. And that's something that would be important for me to ask. You might not like to work with other people. You like to go heads down, work on your own thing, crank out some excellent work. That's important to know. If that's the kind of role you're looking for, but then you find out that actually the team works together on basically all of our projects, maybe that's not a good fit. Or vice versa. If you're really a team player, you really want to work with other people, you want to bounce ideas around all the time, but then come to find out there's only 2 other researchers and everybody's really working in silos. It's probably something important for you to know. So asking about the role, what you'll be working on when you arrive, what the role looks like in the future, asking the hiring manager that, but then asking other teammates what their experience has been, right? They're not going to know about yours. They're not going to know what your hiring manager has in store for you, but they could tell you about their experience. So asking them what that looks like, that's a potentially predictor of what your role might look like. Potentially, right? Again, you want to ask your hiring manager about you, fully knowing that things can change, right? And again, that's why asking other teammates what their experience has been is valuable. Asking other teammates about how they work with the hiring manager and what their style is like. That one to me is really important as well, because managers have all different styles. Some are more mentor-like and they want to coach and train and teach along the way. Some are very hands-off. They're busy doing their own thing. They're hiring kick-ass people to come and crank out excellent work, and they don't have the bandwidth or desire to train and mentor. So that's something I would want to know. I would ask the hiring manager what their mentorship style is, and I would ask my potential teammates what their experience has been like with the hiring manager. Because again, if you're really seeking, I've worked with a lot of people who they hire me as a coach because their manager has no bandwidth for any sort of mentorship. So literally I come along to brainstorm and talk about the projects they're working on, right? It's a different coaching relationship than somebody who wants to work past something or learn how to work with other people. But sometimes literally people want to work with me because they need a sounding board. And I almost act like as a manager would in terms of reviewing work and stuff like that. So you want to know, if you're looking for a mentor, if you're looking for somebody to shape you, to help you grow, then asking your hiring manager about their mentorship style and asking your potential teammates about their experience with the manager is really valuable. And to that end, think about who your mentor, who your manager, what does that look like for you in an ideal state? And that can help you think about those kinds of questions that you want to ask people and what you need. Think about your past experiences when you've had a great manager. What made that person a great manager? Think about your past experiences when you've had a bad manager and what made that a bad manager. Or a bad interaction, right? Because maybe there's not really good and bad people, but it's just this interaction where you had an interaction with somebody that wasn't great or that was really great. So what made those experiences really great and not great? And think about that as you ask questions. As a proper researcher, make sure your questions are open-ended. So you don't want to just say like, is she a good mentor? Is he a good manager, right? We don't want those yes, no questions where people will just say, yep, she's great, or yep, he's great. But try to keep those open-ended. So you're really giving the people you're asking questions to, who you're interviewing, you're giving them a chance to really share whatever comes to mind for them. So you just say, what kind of manager is this? What kind of mentor is this? How has it been for you? And then, let people share their experiences. So those are questions about the role, management style. You might want to ask questions about the company and the culture in the company. So you might want to ask things about what other employees are like. Like, what is that like? Are people, friendly? Are people open? Are people social? Are people getting together after work for happy hour? Are there team offsites? Are there things like that really bring the employees together? Are they doing fun things outside of work where people are together? You might like that kind of thing. You might not like that kind of thing. I mean, I've met people before who have felt excluded because there are a lot of happy hours and they don't drink and they don't feel comfortable going to happy hours. That's a totally different topic. You can have happy hours where it's not, just focused around drinks and things like that. But that's something you want to know. If you like these kinds of things or you don't like these kinds of things, what are people doing in the office to connect? Are they open to different things? Maybe you have ideas. You have ideas that connect people, that bring people together. And you want to know, are they open to these kinds of things? Are they just set in their ways like, nope, we have our team offsite twice a year and that's all we do? Or are they like, yeah, people bring things to the table all the time. We get together, we do this, we do that. That might be something you're interested in knowing. You might want to ask questions specifically to people just about their experiences. Like, why did you choose to work here? What do you love about it here? What don't you love about it here? And just, again, open-ended to find out the things that are resonating for people about what they like and don't like about their company. Remember that it's just their experience. So you want to think about what would be a good environment for you. And just be careful with that, right? Like if somebody says something isn't a good experience for them, doesn't mean you'll have that same experience. But if you hear the same thing over and over from numerous people, that might be an indication, right? So for example, if you hear that, I'm just going to make something up, but like the direction of the team or of the company has been really unclear and people don't feel like they have direction. They're uncertain about the company's success. They're uncertain about their own future at the company. All right, if you hear that from one person, that's a data point of one. If you hear that now from 4 different people, that might be an indication that that's something important to think about and to look out for. Or not, you might decide, you know what, that's their experience and I'm going to try it anyway because I'm super excited. And your experience again might be totally different. You might go in there and have a completely different experience and you feel you're getting the support you need and the growth you need. And, it's different from other people in the company, but, it might be something that you want to ask. Similarly, you can ask about change, like how has the team changed? If somebody tells you they've been on a team for 4 years, how has the team dynamic changed? How has the company changed? How has the projects that they work on, how have those changed? Do people feel they're getting opportunities for growth? If growth is something that's really important to you and you're coming in at a junior level, but that you want to rise in the ranks and, you can ask people what that experience has been like for them. You can ask about the performance review process. This is actually a really big one. So performance review process is different at many companies. And that's something that you might want to know. What does that look like? What are people's what is it based on? And if you're working in teams versus working in a silo, how does that play into the performance review? So anything like that, that again is important to you. And I'd have these questions drafted ahead of time. And then, again, it's a personal experience. They're interviewing you, you're interviewing them. Some things might come up in the interview that you're like, I'm going to ask about this specific thing. As far as those growth trajectories, I would ask those to the hiring manager, right? You ask your hiring manager, what does this role look like now? What does it look like in the future? What does the team look like in the future? And again, fully knowing that these things can change, but you're really assessing if there are opportunities to learn, to grow, and for your own role, what that trajectory might look like. Some companies will have that mapped out. They will say, we have this all mapped out. We have the different levels. You come in at this level, you're operating at this level, you get promoted. They have it all mapped out. Others don't have such a sophisticated system. So that's something you might want to know. I just forgot about one other thing that I was going to mention along those lines about growth trajectory. Oh, we'll come back to it later. Oh, I know what I was going to say. So the other group of people to think about the kinds of questions you'll ask are your partners. So the questions you're asking your hiring manager and your potential teammates, these are people you're working closely with. Your hiring manager is the one who's dictating your position. Your teammates, you're asking about their experience because that's potentially similar to yours. But the other people to think about are, if you're a researcher, your design partner or your engineer partner or PM or marketing folks that you might be working with. So oftentimes when we are in an interview loop, we have the opportunity to talk to these people as well. And if not, you may want to reach out to people. LinkedIn is a great place to find other people who work in the company. You could find people with these other roles that are different from yours, who you partner with. So you've already talked to the hiring manager. You've already talked to your potential teammates. You already know that you're going to be working closely as a researcher. You're going to be working closely with a designer, or as a designer, you're going to be working closely with a researcher. So what you want to do is when you're talking to those people, ask about their relationship with the person in your role. So if you're a researcher, you're talking to a design partner or potential design partner, and you ask them what their experience is like working with researchers. And the things I'd be looking for there is this a collaborative environment? Is the designer and researcher working in silos? Or one of my favorite relationships, you may have heard this from me before, if you've joined me before, if we chatted before, one of my favorite relationships is the researcher with the data scientist. So like, I want to talk to the data scientists and I want to ask them, what is your experience like working with researchers at this company or anywhere for that matter? Because you as a new researcher can develop a relationship, even if your data science partner hasn't had that with their previous researchers they worked at that company, but you can come in and develop a relationship. So I would want to know that. One of my favorite relationships is I learn things in research and I go and talk to my data science partner and say, I learned this. What have you seen in the data? And maybe they haven't seen anything and they go dig around and then they're like, oh, wow, I didn't realize this before. And vice versa. They find things in the data that they bring to me and say, have you noticed this in your research? And together we develop a research plan, right? What else do we want to learn? So I would definitely think about your research partners and what kinds of questions you want to ask them. If they work sometimes people work in silos and they're very protective of their role and of their data. I've seen this with researchers. I've seen this with data scientists. I've seen this with different roles. And that's something I want to know. Like, is the potential team I'm working with, is everybody very protective of their data, of their work? Or are they more collaborative? I prefer a more collaborative environment. I prefer researchers who are sharing, throwing data over the fence, like, hey, I just learned this in my research session. How about you? I want to work with people who are more collaborative and share data, and especially data scientists. You're working at a company and you're working on building and improving products that usually, if I want to say never, but let's just say usually, that usually doesn't happen with just one person. It takes a team. to make that happen. And to me, when people are operating in silos and not sharing the information they have, that's not good for anyone. It's definitely not good for the company you're working for, and it's not good for any of your teammates. And sometimes people are like this because of that performance evaluation. So back to the performance evaluation questions. Sometimes people are worried that if they're collaborating with others, well, who's going to get credit for it in their performance evaluation, right? So they want to hold tight to any information they have so they can say on their performance evaluation that this was their responsibility and any impact, any outcome was a result of their work as opposed to a collaboration. And I don't like that. I think we need to share and be open about it. And on our performance evaluation, we can say we collaborated with, data science or whatever partners, because again, these things often, if not ever, don't happen on their own. And really it takes these partnerships. So I would definitely ask those kinds of questions. Questions about the hiring process. So at the end of an interview, you can ask questions like, what are the next steps? What is the timeline? That's totally appropriate. I would save those to the end. Before asking any questions about this, like what is taking place right now, right? The hiring process for this exact role. Before that, that's kind of like the period at the end of the sentence. Before getting into those questions, I would want to ask questions about the company, about the culture, about things like that. But it's totally appropriate to ask those kinds of questions so you know what is coming next. Totally appropriate. You often can ask those questions to the recruiter, assuming you're working with a recruiter at a company. You usually can ask those questions to the recruiter too. So don't feel like if you only have time for one question, don't let it be, what are the next steps? Actually have a question prepared for your hiring manager, for the teammate about the actual role. Because again, I can't emphasize this enough. Just as much as they're interviewing you, you are interviewing them. You're assessing if this company, if this team, if this manager, if they are a good fit for you. Because I know a lot of you are wanting the job right now and you're working really hard at crafting your resume and practicing interview questions so you can get the interview, so you can get the job. But I promise you, if it's not a good fit, you're going to get there and you're not going to want to stay there. Sometimes it feels like I will take anything. But again, once you get there, if it's not a good fit, you're not going to be happy. And then you'll be regretting putting all your eggs in that basket. So take your time, ask the right questions, learn about a company. Now, before you even get to those questions, there's work you could do going into an interview to better understand a company. What I do not recommend is going in cold. Let's imagine you have applied for all these different jobs or, companies that you don't know a lot about. Imagine somebody sent you a job posting and said, you'd be great for this role. You quickly applied for it, but you didn't even do any research to find out more about the company, about the team, about what they're working on, about what they're building. Then you get there and they're asking you questions like, pick a problem on our website, pick a problem on our app, and how would you fix it? Design a research study to fix this, right? And if you have done zero research ahead of time, that's going to be a really hard question to answer. And think about, like, if you really don't know anything about the company, well, how would you even answer that? What you don't want to say is like, oh gosh, I don't know, like I'll come along and I'll find out what the problems are. Like, you can't come up with anything right now. If I asked you right now, like on LinkedIn, pick something, you probably can come up with something. Even if you think it's the best product ever and there's no usability issues, you still probably on the fly can think like, all right, let me think about a problem that I would fix. Frankly, you can prepare by thinking ahead of time what would be something you could research on a given product. It's a really common interview question to be asked something very open, something very generic about, pick something on our app or on our website in our product, pick something that you would want to research and why. So thinking about that ahead of time, having something in your pocket that you can respond about, something you would research on that product is very, very wise, because that question often comes up. So be prepared. Be prepared. Know something about the company. Know something about the product. So those are other questions you can ask, right? So not only might you be asked questions like design a research study, But when you're asked, do you have any more questions? Maybe you have a question about the product. Maybe it's a question about the team and what they've been working on. Maybe it's a question about your hiring manager. You looked them up on LinkedIn. You saw something from their a past role they've had, and you have questions about that, right? So just do some research up front to show that you care, to show that you're engaged, to show that you're passionate about that product, even if you just learned about the product. Somebody might have sent you a job posting and you're like, I never heard of this company before. And you go and look it up. That's okay. This is one of those cases where it's okay to fake it, do a little research, and then in the interview, you are passionate about that product. I mean, you're passionate, you're excited to get the job, you're excited to get the interview, but it's okay. I mean, you're not going to lie and say, oh, I've been using this product for 10 years. I'm not asking you to lie, but it's okay to show that you know about the product, even if you just learned about the product. That's okay. Nobody's quizzing you on that. And that's not what's going to get you the job, right? Whether or not you've been a user of the product for 10 years or not. That doesn't matter, right? You could just be learning about the product now, but do a little research so you can go in and ask some questions about the product or about the direction of the company, things that you have discovered online. What else? These are some big ones, I would say. Maybe that's all I have for you today. So questions about the team, what their team dynamic is like, what they've been working on, what their roles have. So if you're talking to teammates, what their experience has been like, what their collaboration is like with others, what the company culture is like, what the in the office, out of the office is like. For your hiring manager, similar questions, but pitched a little bit differently. For your hiring manager, you want to know about your role, what you're going to be working on right when you arrive, what the future looks like for this role, what the future looks like for the team. Oh, I have another one. If you're interested in managing. So many people are interested in managing, and there may not be management positions available at a given time. And that's okay. You can enter into a company, into a team as an individual contributor. One question you may want to ask the hiring manager is what the team trajectory looks like, if they plan on growing, if the manager has ideas for future management positions. And you can say, I've managed in the past, or I haven't, but I'm interested, right? You could say, right now I want to be an individual contributor, but I'm potentially interested in managing in the past. What does that look like? Do you think you're going to have more management positions? This is especially important right now because I've seen a lot of flattening of orgs across the board in numerous companies where they've removed middle management or some layers of middle management. So that might be something really important for you. If you know you want to manage, does this team, does this company, is there a potential to manage in the future? Conversely, if you're not interested in managing at all, you may want to know, right? Do they see that you're coming in with lots of management experience and they're like, okay, I'm going to hire you as an individual contributor, but I have my eyes on you as a manager in the near future. But meanwhile, you're like, I don't want to be a manager. I want to be an individual contributor. So these are important questions to ask, right? Similarly, if you're being hired as a manager and you want to move up, you're interested in a director level role. What does that look like? What are the opportunities in the company to rise? It might be a small company and they just don't have that many positions. That might be something you want to know. Fully knowing, again, that things can change. So what you're doing with these questions is getting an idea of culture, of how people respond, what the general attitude, what the general sentiment is, the general feeling, but fully knowing things may change. Somebody may say, this is it. We're not hiring for a while. We don't have any more manager positions. But then one of the managers quits. And now all of a sudden there's a management position available, right? So keep that in mind that things can change even after people have shared the responses. But what you want to do is get a general feel of these things. So I hope this has been helpful for you. If you ever want to brainstorm some of these questions, if you ever want to practice some of these questions, practice interview questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm here as a resource for you anytime. You can find me at uxrcoach.com. And hope you all have a wonderful day, a wonderful evening, wherever you're calling in from. And thank you so much for spending some time with me today. See ya.